Hello all, I'm Sai and you're watching The Book Dragon. In today's video, I'm bringing to you my favorite books from the second quarter of 2022. I should say that the second quarter was a bit better than the first quarter in terms of reading for me, but it is not like all the books in this list have surpassed any of my favorite books from the first quarter of the year. And I also have totally 8 books here, of which 6 are fiction and 2 are non-fiction. I'll talk about the fiction books first and then we'll move on to the non-fiction books. I'm also going to talk about the books in the order which I read them, that is from April to June. So without any further ado, let's get into the books right away. So the first book in the list is the only audio book and all the other books in this list are physical books. The book that I'm talking about is Playing Nice by J.P. Delaney, which is a psychological thriller book, and I did not know that this book existed until we decided that we are going to read this for a book club that I'm a part of on Instagram, and I should say that this was a greatly surprising read for me because it was really awesome. Here we follow two families whose babies have been swapped 2 years back when they were born, and both of the couples are not aware of the fact that the babies have been swapped during the time of their birth. So after these 2.5 years, one of the two couples gets to know that their babies have been swapped, and they bring this to the knowledge of the other couple also. How they are going to deal with this issue and what are the further steps that they are going to take together is the plot of the book. I should say that this was really well written except for a little flaws here and there. As a whole, it was a really amazing read and it is definitely a page turner. So if you are a person who is in a reading slump right now, please do go forward and try this. I'm sure that it will get you out of the reading slump because it is really fast paced, and the way in which the author makes you think and decode some stuff in the second half of the book is just awesome. I should also say that this is one of the most intentional type of writings that I've seen so far this year, because each and everything that the author talks about in the first half of the book seems very casual and mundane that we all do on a daily basis, but how all of those things make sense in the second half of the book was just amazing. So this is definitely my first favorite book from the second quarter. The next one is a young adult contemporary book, and it is Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan. This one was also a very surprising read for me because I have loved few of the John Green books which I've read before this one, but there was one book alone which just I hated so much, but this was really very different from all the other books that he has written so far in my own opinion. I can even say that this has become my most favorite John Green book above all the other books that I've read by him so far. I just have 2 other books by John Green which I have not read until now, which are Let It Snow and his latest release, The Anthropocene Reviewed. Here we follow our 2 main characters who are both named Will Grayson, and because of some things that happen in the first few pages of the book, both of these characters come into contact and meet each other. They are not similar in any way at all, starting from the type of people they are and the circles in which they are a part of to their families, but they have this common name which just brings them together and meet each other, and from that point on the story just evolves a lot more and it is really funny. Okay, just like any other John Green book, this one is also very witty and funny in its own way. But I should say that of both the types of writings that we see here, I like David Levithan's kind of writing a lot more compared to that of John Green here. After reading this one, I definitely want to read more of David Levithan's books, which I have not done so far, but as a whole this was a really fun filled package and it just felt like a slice of life kind of book, and that is the type of book which I wanted while I was reading this one. So this is definitely a favorite from the second quarter. The next one is a YA high fantasy, and it is Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor, which is the second and final book inside the Strange the Dreamer duology. I read the first book in the series, Strange the Dreamer, in 2020, and it is one of the most beautifully written books that I've read so far, as well as the characters inside the first book were just awesome. I don't know why I put off reading this book for so long, but when I wanted to read this, I just went back and reread Strange the Dreamer and read this just after that one. And it was a great decision because I was able to see a lot of things that were connected between the first and second book a lot better because I reread Strange the Dreamer and came here. The best thing about this series is the characters that the author has written and the world building that she has done. Okay, the world just feels so beautiful and realistic in each and every way possible. Almost it is like a fairy tale, but it has its own dark edge always. In the first book, we just follow a single storyline and that is the only thing which drives the plot as a whole, but here it is not like that. We follow 2 different storylines, and the second storyline which we follow comes into focus only in the beginning of the second book. It just feels like the second storyline and the first storyline which we've been following from the first book are disconnected completely in the first half of the book, and the way in which the author just connects them together and shows us all the meeting points in the second half of the book is just awesome. I cannot say that this is better than Strange the Dreamer. I still liked Strange the Dreamer more than this one. Still, it was the perfect sequel for that book, and the most important thing which I loved about the second book in the series was that the author did not make the main characters in this book behave out of their character traits in any way at all, even though the stakes were very high for most part towards the ending of the book. So this is definitely a favorite. The next book is an adult contemporary romance, and it is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I read the first book by this author Beach Read last year in September, and I wanted to read this ever since I finished reading that itself. So I finally picked it up in May, and I should say that this was a lifesaver for me because for the first 10 to 15 days of May I was in this massive reading slump, and this is the book which just got me out of that reading slump because it is that good in its way. Here we follow our 2 main characters, Poppy and Alex, who've been friends ever since college, and they have this tradition of going together on a vacation each and every year, no matter how short it is. but they are the only two people who go on that vacation and no one else with them. But what has happened is that for the past 2 years they have not gone out together because 2 years back something happened in the vacation which they are not able to come back from. At this point what happens is Poppy is in kind of a plateau in her career and she wants this break from her work, so she offers this opportunity to Alex to go out and be on a vacation again, and he accepts to go out with her. What are all the things that happen in that vacation and whether their friendship gets evolved into a romance or heals properly to become the same friendship that it was 2 years back is the actual plot of the book. I can say that this is very similar to Beach Read in terms of the characters, because in Beach Read we follow the two main characters and it's not just the romance which we focus on throughout the book, it's also the personal development of the characters individually, and the way in which the author explains the trauma of both the main characters in that one as well as this one are equally good. I can say that that is one of the main reasons why I liked both of these books, because it is not completely about the romance itself but the people who are involved in the romance, and the way in which the author shows them as real people to us with problems and successes in their lives is really good. So this is another book which you can read if you are in a reading slump, because it helped me get out of one. The next book is an adult grimdark fantasy book, and it is Grey Sister by Mark Lawrence, which is the second book inside the Book of the Ancestor trilogy. I read all the 3 books in this series in the second quarter itself, and I should say that of all the 3 books inside the series, this is my most favorite, because both the first and third books had like very minor issues which didn't make them as good as this one. Here we follow our main character Nona Grey when she is 10 years old and how she is brought into this convent of Sweet Mercy which trains novices to become magical assassin nuns. It's definitely a series which just sounds very grimdark and basic in its level, but the way in which the author has explored this world, shown the magic as well as built the characters from book 1 to book 3 is just awesome. I'm selecting this book in specific because this is a book which just feels so much well calibrated and put together of all the 3 books inside the series. If you ask me, I can say that the first book was slower than it needs to be and the third book was shorter than it needs to be, but this one is just perfecting each and every proportion if you ask me, because we see the proper amount of character work that needs to happen in a second book without making the story lag because of that, and the way in which the author paced the story and showed the development of the characters to us and explained the world much more in detail here was really nice. There are some things which are left vague in the first book that needs to be explored properly in the second and third books inside the series, which are done by the author properly in the third book also, but I think that this was far more in meter compared to the third book, because I think the third book could have been 30 to 40 pages longer not to show us all the things that we wanted to see in the finale of the series, but I did not face any of those kind of issues here, so this is definitely my most favorite of all the 3 books inside the series, and that's why I'm putting it in this list. The next book is Cujo by Stephen King. You can categorize this as a thriller as well as horror book. For me, it was more of a thriller book than a horror, because I felt a lot more thrilled rather than frightened while I was reading this book, because most of the things that happen here for the main character deal with the emotions that she faces while she is put to danger along with her son, and because of this I just felt like it was a lot more thrilling than frightening for me. Personally, I think that it is a very short story, but in order to just make the book a bit more longer, Stephen King added a lot more side stories also which are definitely not necessary for the book, but as a whole I should say that this book delivered everything that I expected out of it, so it is definitely one of my favorites from this quarter, and it was also my most favorite book from the last month, that is June. I have a dedicated review for this one, and if I have dedicated reviews for any of the other books that I'm talking about in this video, all of them will be linked down in the description, so please do go and check them out if you are interested. So yeah, Cujo is the next book inside the list. Moving on to the non-fiction books, the first of these two is When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi, which is a memoir of the author that was written by him after he was diagnosed for cancer and got to know that he'll be just dying in a few more months. I should say that the reality of his life is just portrayed perfectly by his writing in this one, and each and everything that he says just strikes your heart right away, and it will pull some chord in you, because all of us are going to die someday or the other in life, and the fact that the author knew that he's going to die in a few more days and has to do all the things that he wants to do in the short amount of time that he has is very heart-wrenching in each and every way possible. I'm sure that I'll not be able to sum up this book properly for you guys, because the author has done it in the most perfect way than anyone else can, and I'd highly suggest everyone to read it, because his story is something which is deserving enough to be known by more people in the world. But one thing which I want to tell you guys is that if you're sad right now, please don't go forward and read this book, because it will just make you even more sad, even though it is very honest and transparent in its way. So yeah, When Breath Becomes Air is the first favorite non-fiction book of mine from the second quarter. The last book in this list is Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig, and this is the book which I related to the most of all the books in this list, because the author talks about anxiety as well as depression in this book, and I'm sure that if you're a person who's suffering from either of these two things, you need to read this book, because you'll be able to understand how much the author empathizes with you. and you'll be able to relate with most of the things that the author talks about here also. It is because the author himself has suffered from anxiety and depression a lot in his past, and the way in which he talks about his experience and his healing journey to us in this book is just awesome. Okay, it is a book which is very transparent and honest again, but the way in which the author has written it is not in such a way that it will frighten you even more about both of these issues, but the way in which he helps you and tells you to deal with them is very understanding, if you ask me. He does not say that anxiety as well as depression are things which you can get out of easily. He just emphasizes and makes clear to people that both of these things are not easy to deal with, and the people who are suffering from them are a lot more strong, because it is not possible to do all the things that we do on a daily basis with both of these things taking a toll on our mental health always. Because of various advancements in our technology and the urbanization that we have right now in the world, we get to know a lot of stuff that are going around the world, and it is always not necessary to get to know and understand the things that are going on in different places across the world. If you are suffering from anxiety or depression, you should read this book, because you'll be able to understand how much strong you are and how much you are helping yourself properly. I was able to relate with this book so deeply, so it is definitely one of my favorites from the second quarter. So yes guys, these are all my favorite books from the second quarter of 2022, and don't forget to leave your favorite books from this last quarter in the comments below, because I'd like to know your favorite books and get some recommendations from them. And if you did enjoy watching today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also share it to your friends. If you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.